Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Tay and this is Venter's Bookshelf. So as you can see, I've got a little helper today. This is my youngest daughter. She is 3. And today I'm bringing you guys my first quarter wrap up. So this is going to be a super chill video talking about my stats and the things that I read in January, February, and March. So, without further ado, let's jump into the wrap up. Okay, so the first stat I kind of want to talk to you guys about is my owned TBR conversion. So, in first quarter, I read 19 books off of my owned TBR. And I do have that in a graphic that I will put up on the screen so you can see which ones they were. I feel really good about that number, especially with the recent book haul that I posted earlier, which if you haven't seen that, I will link it up in the corner for you. And yeah, it's been a goal to read more of my own TBR this year and to read more than I am adding to it. So I think I did a pretty good job in first quarter. Okay, so jumping into January, I do have my laptop right over here. So if I'm looking off camera, I'm looking at my notes that I made. So my format breakdown for January was 63% audio, 25% print, and 13% digital. So that's a little bit different than I was trending last year. So audiobook obviously is still my most used format, but between last year and this year, my stats for print and digital flipped. So last year, digital was my second most used format, and this year it's print. So that's interesting. My most read genres were romance, horror, and fantasy. Horror and fantasy, not a surprise. I think that romance is a little bit more of a surprise, but I'm also not surprised because of the readathon that I participated in January. My total books read for January was 16, and my average rating was 4.02 stars. I did participate in 2 readathons and 2 reading challenges for January. So the first one was January, which is a Jane Austen themed readathon that I hosted with my friend Kay from Vintage Twirly Girl on Instagram. I will link her profile down in the description box so you can check her stuff out. And it was a whole lot of fun. It was the whole month of January. We had this bingo board that had not only all of Jane Austen's works on it, but prompts that followed the themes and tropes that you usually find in her writing. So you could read any kind of book that fits those prompts, just to break it up so you're not reading Regency romance the whole month. And for that one, I read By the Book by Julia Sonneborn, The Stroke of Winter by Wendy Webb. I read Sanditon and the Watsons by Jane Austen. Those were her 2 unfinished works. I read Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett and The Missing Manuscript of Jane Austen by Siri James. I also participated in Winterween, which this time was just hosted by Gabby from Gabby Reads. I will link her in the description box as well. For that, I read Stolen Tongues by Felix Maxwell, Witches Volume 1 by Scott Snyder, Warstorm by Victoria Aveyard, and The Ghost from the Grand Banks by Arthur C. Clarke. For the Buzzword Challenge, that is, I guess, hosted by Kayla from Books and Lala every year, I read Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey for the There prompt for January. And my friends and I have a couple of bingo boards that we put together with all of our favorite books for each other to read over the course of 2024. So there's a general bingo board, and for that one, I read For the Free Space, which was just one of the buddy reads that we were doing in January, and that was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. And then I read The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle for the horror bingo card. Moving on to stats for February, we have my format breakdown is 45% audio, 28% print, and 28% digital. So for February, print and digital did a tie. My most read genres were fantasy, romance, and horror once again. And I read a total of 29 books. This was a leap year, so I did in fact read a book a day in February. My average rating was 4.3 stars, and I did participate in 2 readathons and 2 reading challenges. The readathons that I did were 24 hours horror-thon. I will put the host's information down in the description box for all of the readathons. And for horror-thon, I did end up reading 4 and DNFing 1. So those books were Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfeld, Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valenti, Something is Killing the Children by James Tinian IV, Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu, and Everything the Darkness Eats by Eric LaRocca. I also participated in 72 hours in the Reading Nook. Again, host information are in the description box. And for that one, I read An Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed by Helene Thurston, Sorceline by Sylvia Doye, Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, finally, Murder by the Book by Lauren Elliott, and Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. For Buzzwordathon, the prompt was positive words, and I read How to Find Love in a Bookshop by Veronica Henry. And then in February, I read a lot for Besties Bingo. So for the general bingo card, I read Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, Vicious by V.E. Schwab, and Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. And then for the horror bingo card, I read Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield and Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. And for my March stats, let's see, format breakdown, 53% audio, 30% digital, and 17% print. So digital and print did switch back to what it was last year. My most read genres for March were middle grade, of course, because middle grade March, fantasy and horror, and I read a total of 30 books. My average rating was 4.23 stars, and I did 1 readathon and 3 reading challenges for March. The readathon I participated in was Bookwormathon, which was hosted by 2 of my besties, and for that I read quite a lot of books. So here we go. Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto, The City of Ember by Jean Duprow, Death of a Cozy Writer by G.M. Mallier, Ghost Book by Remy Lai, The Girl in White by Lindsay Curry, Always Clementine by Carly Saraski, Cave Beyond Time by Malcolm Boss, Foxglove by Adeline Grace, and The Lonely Heart of Maybelle Lane by Kate O'Shaughnessy. For the reading challenges, I did do middle grade March, and you will see overlap between the reading challenges and readathons, just because I like to double up wherever I can, so I'm not attempting to read 100 books every month. So for middle grade March was The City of Ember by Jean Duprow, Ghost Book by Remy Lai, The Girl in White by Lindsay Curry, Always Clementine by Carly Saraski, The Lonely Heart of Maybelle Lane by Kate O'Shaughnessy, Mommy, Kira, and Echo Mountain by Lauren Wolk. For the buzzword challenge, the prompt was character names, so Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers fit into that one. And then there were four for Besties Bingo. For the general bingo was Gallant by V.E. Schwab, Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and Killers of a Certain Age by Deanna Rayburn. And then the horror bingo was Craven Manor by Darcy Coates. Okay, moving on to my favorite books for first quarter. For January, there was one, and that is The Stroke of Winter by Wendy Webb. Of course, I gave this 5 stars. You can consider my favorites to be like my 6-star rating ones. And this was a cozy mystery thriller. You could call it horror too. For me, it was like the perfect blend of creepy and cozy. And it was set in an inherited B&B, and there's art references, and there's a bit of a romance, and it was just absolutely fantastic. For February, I had 3 favorites. The first being Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. This I took the recommendation from Kayla from Books and Lala. And this is definitely a weird fiction book. I would also classify it as a thriller. And it was about these 2 teenagers who, over the course of the summer, kind of accidentally created a cult and the chaos that ensues from that. It was so captivating, and I think everybody should read it. My second favorite for February was Mama Cusses by Gwenna Lathland. So this is a non-fiction parenting book, and Gwenna Lathland is a content creator on YouTube, TikTok, and she posts all sorts of parenting type content that is really relatable, and she is hilarious, and I totally vibe with her content, with her style, with her experiences. So when I found out that she had a book coming out, I requested the ARC on NetGalley, and I got it, and I read it, and it was amazing. So if you are a parent, I highly, highly recommend picking up her book. And then we have Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. So I, for my Christmas book shopping, found the 10th anniversary edition, and it's gorgeous. I have read Rainbow Rowell before. I've read the Simon Snow trilogy, and I've read Pumpkinheads. So I knew that I liked her writing style, I liked her wit. So I picked up Fangirl, and it was a favorite. It was so, so good. There was bipolar representation in it, which really hits home for me because I do have bipolar disorder, and it was just everything I wanted it to be and more. It was so cozy. It was so funny. It was just an absolute blast of a time to read. And then I have 2 favorites that came out of my March reading. And the first one is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. So this one is a newer release. It's been read by so many different people. It was the book troop pick for either January or February for Gabby Reed's book club, the book troop. And I wasn't able to read it during that time frame because there was a ridiculous hold time through my library, but I did get it in March and I read it, and it is fantastic. So this is a retelling of the Ted Bundy murders from the perspective of the sorority girls who survived the attack on the sorority. Now, there is fictionalizations in it. It is a novel. It's not true crime. However, it was very well done. I am a true crime fan. I know the Bundy murders forwards and backwards, and I thought that Jessica Knoll did a really, really, really good job of portraying the events, but keeping the focus on the girls, on the survivors. And one of the things that I love about this book is his name is never mentioned. He is only called the defendant, which takes power from him. You know, he's dead, he's gone. And he still has power because people say his name, because people talk about him. So this book was taking the power away from him and giving it to the women, which it gave me chills. It was so, so good. And then my last favorite for first quarter is, of course, Foxglove by Adeline Grace. As you may know, I 100% adored Belladonna. There is a screenshot of a face I made talking about Belladonna in a video that is now an emoji in my besties Discord. And anytime someone's talking about either Belladonna or Foxglove, they use this emoji of my face. And it's funny. I love it. But yes, so I read Foxglove. Amazing again. I did predict what was happening, but it did not take away from my enjoyment of the story. I thought it was a great continuation from the events of the first book, and I am even more excited for Wisteria to come out in August. Okay, now I have some DNFs to talk about. I'm not going to go into detail on the synopsis of these at all. I'm just going to tell you why I DNF'd them. So I didn't have any DNFs for January, but I had 2 for February. The first one being Everything the Darkness Eats by Eric LaRocca. This one just was not holding my attention. I really didn't care about what was happening, so I decided not to waste any more time on it. And then I also DNF'd Malice in February. This is by John Gwynne, and it is an epic fantasy. I had it only in audiobook format, and I think with epic fantasy, I need to have the audiobook plus something to read with my eyes. So either the print format or an ebook format to really get the amount of detail for the characters and the world building and all of that to really stick. So that one is a soft DNF, and I do plan on going back to it at some point when I have the time to really dedicate to a very complex world. And then for March, I had 5 DNFs. March was the month of DNF for me. So the first one was The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. I don't really know what to say about this one, except I just wasn't vibing with it. I got about halfway through and the premise was intriguing, but I don't think the execution of the story lived up to the premise. Then I had The Ark of the Cemetery of Untold Stories by Julia Alvarez. This one I enjoyed the amount that I read of it. However, it was too slow paced for when I picked it up. So this one is a soft DNF. I do plan on going back to it when I'm not up against a deadline for an arc. So yeah, soft DNF on Cemetery of Untold Stories. Then I attempted to read David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I have read Charles Dickens in the past and really enjoyed his writing. However, with this one, I didn't care about the characters, and that's literally all this book is. It's a character study. So DNF'd. I don't think I will ever pick this one back up, to be honest, and that's okay. Then, much to the chagrin of my bestie Laura, I DNF'd Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz. I don't know. I think I expected this to be a different book than it was. And I just wasn't vibing with it. I was feeling like I was reading a completely different book from what I was expecting, and that just really threw it off for me. I don't think I'll pick this one back up, unfortunately, but that's okay. Not every book is for every reader. And then finally, I DNF'd God Killer by Hannah Kaner. So I had high expectations for this one, and it just wasn't holding my attention. There was no captivating element to it for me. So I ended up DNFing it, and I probably won't pick this one back up. I don't exactly know what I wanted from it, but I know it didn't deliver. All right, now into a bit more meatier part of this wrap up. So we're going to go over my highs and my lows for each month. Now, when I mean highs and lows, I mean the books that I gave 5 stars and my 2 lowest rated books of each month. So for January, I had 3 5-star books. The first one being Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This was following an octopus and an old woman who was his caretaker, and then a kid, or I guess young adult, who was wanting information about his father. And it really was very heartwarming, and it was bittersweet for the ending, but it was done in the best way. So if you like relationship stories, like friendship relationship stories, familial relationship stories, if you like stories of self-discovery, definitely pick up Remarkably Bright Creatures. I also gave 5 stars to By the Book by Julia Sonneborn. This I read for January, and it is a persuasion retelling, and it was so good. So we're following this professor who is coming up on a tenure option at this university, but she has to be published by a certain date to gain tenure. And her ex is now the president of the university. So in many ways, he is her boss. So it is a second chance romance. It is in an academic setting. It has the funniest best friend character. And it was just so relaxing to read, to be honest. It was a very easy read. It was something you could just curl up with and enjoy. So good. And then my last 5-star for January was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. So I finally jumped on the ACOTAR train last year, and I read ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I gave it a 4. It was good. It wasn't spectacular, but it wasn't bad. And everyone told me that I needed to read Mist and Fury because it was the best. So in January, I got the dramatized audiobook for Mist and Fury, and it was so good. Definitely the best that I have read so far. I do plan to continue on in the series, and I highly, highly recommend the dramatized audiobooks. They just really immerse you into the world much more than the regular audiobook does, and it was just a wonderful reading experience. And then my 2 lowest rated for January were Witches Volume 1 by Scott Snyder. This I gave 2.5 stars. I read it for Winterween, and this was a horror graphic novel, and I didn't like the art style. The story was bad. I liked the colorization of it, which is why it gets 2.5 stars and not lower. But I definitely don't plan on continuing with that series at all. And then Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey, I gave 3 stars. There really wasn't anything like wrong with this book. It was just very generic for me. But it fulfilled the prompt. It wasn't horrible. And in this, we are following a character who is trying to protect this group of wolves. Like, that's her job. And that's kind of all there was. There was a little bit of a romance gone wrong, and then there's some psychosis elements to it, but nothing that really felt fully fledged out, in my opinion. So that's why it only got a 3. For February, I had 6 5-star books. The first of which is Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valenti. This is a horror novella, and I really don't know how to talk about this book without spoiling it. I did have a spoiler section in my Winterween vlog when I read this book, so I could talk about it. So I will just say that it is based on lore that everybody knows, and it was fantastic. So yeah, that's basically all I can say, because it is a novella. It is so short, I can't really say anything else without spoiling it. I also gave 5 stars to The Missing Manuscript of Jane Austen by Siri James. This was Jane Austen meets National Treasure, and it was so much fun. So our main character buys this book of poems from a thrift store and finds 2 pages stuck together. And so she gently separates the pages, and out pops a letter. And she works as a archivist for a library and literature, so she knows immediately by the handwriting and by the way the sentences are constructed that this is a letter from Jane Austen to her sister Cassandra. And she takes the letter and she follows the clues within the letter to this estate and is looking for a manuscript that the letter states went missing in the days before Pride and Prejudice. So she goes to this estate. There is the grumpy estate owner who is in financial dire and is going to be selling the estate. So they spend like all night searching for this manuscript, and then they find it. And then we get to actually read said manuscript within the book. Now, this is all fiction. There is no actual missing Jane Austen novel. However, Siri James did a fantastic job of replicating Jane Austen's writing style and her voice in this fictional missing manuscript. I absolutely loved it. The story of the manuscript itself was amazing. The modern time story that we flip back to was great. And if you are a Jane Austen fan, I definitely recommend picking this one up. And then, of course, we have Heartstopper Volume 5 by Alice Oseman. I don't need to tell you what Heartstopper is about. If you're on BookTube, you know what Heartstopper is. And this was the 5th installment in the series. And just, I love Nick and Charlie. I love Nick and Charlie. I love Nick and Charlie. Oh my gosh, I love them so much. I can't believe number 6 is going to be the last one. I love Nick and Charlie so much. So yeah, that of course got 5 stars because it's Heartstopper. I also gave 5 stars to An Elderly Lady Who Must Not Be Crossed. And this is book 2 of the duology. It's the like Alderdom duology, and it is translated short story collections that are all about the same character, an octogenarian who likes to murder people. Yeah, that's it. An octogenarian who likes to murder people. They're really witty and funny, and there's just this whole air of I've lived this long, I can do whatever I want and nobody's gonna cross me type feel to it, and it's so funny. It's a great time, and this wrapped up her story very well. And yeah, I think these are going to be comfort reads for me probably for my whole life because they are just so good. And then I read The Vanishing by Wendy Webb. This was the second book from her that I read after The Stroke of Winter did so well, and it was another 5-star. It was set in this estate, and there were so many plot twists that just kept it moving. So I really don't want to say anything else because there are so many plot twists, and I don't want to accidentally spoil anything. But if you like cozy horror, cozy mystery thrillers, definitely pick this one up because it is just so captivating. My last 5-star for February was Chef's Kiss by Jarrett Melendez. And this was a really cute graphic novel. This guy was wanting to do something different outside of what his parents wanted him to do. And so he gets this like apprenticeship at a restaurant in the kitchen, and he has training in different sections each week, and at the end of each training week he has to pass this challenge, and if he passes the challenge he gets to move on to the next section. If he doesn't pass the challenge, then he's out, and the judge is a pig. It is so cute. It is so wholesome, and it's just an absolutely wonderful read. You will have an amazing time if you pick up this book. Then my 2 lowest rated for February were both 3 stars. The first one being Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I read this for the Besties Bingo, and of course this is a classic. I enjoyed the premise. I definitely see how it's an important book. However, the story for me was just a little dry, a little bit lacking. So that's why it only got 3 stars, but it wasn't a bad book at all. And then Something is Killing the Children, Volume 1 by James Tinian IV. What an author name. This was another horror graphic novel, and it obviously is about a creature taking children. And it was better than Witches, which I read in January and just talked about, but it still wasn't great. I may end up picking the next volume of this up at some point, but probably only if it fits a readathon prompt. I don't think it's something I would read just on my own to read it. And for March, I gave 5 books 5 stars. So the first one is The Restaurant by Pamela M. Kelly. This is a short, like contemporary fiction, kind of a romance. And we are following 3 sisters who just had a relative pass away, and they are left this restaurant. And there is a stipulation in the will that they have to work and run the restaurant for a year before deciding what to do with it. So we're following their time doing that. And of course, each of them has different things going on in their personal lives. They have other jobs that they're trying to balance with this. And they're sisters, so it's a sister story. I thought it was great. I am looking forward to picking up more from Pamela Kelly. There is a kind of sequel to this, and it's a Christmas themed one. It's Christmas at the Restaurant. So I will plan on picking that one up for the holiday season this year as well. Then I also gave 5 stars to Cave Beyond Time by Malcolm Boss. This is one that I've had just kind of sitting in my digital library in my ebook owned TBR. I got it for free off of Amazon, and it was so good. It's short, it's a novella, and it is science fiction, time travel, and archaeology. And Malcolm Boss really has a way with storytelling. And I know that this was an older publication. I think 70s or 80s was when this was originally published. And the author is no longer living. He has passed at this point. So I want to do some more research and see what other of his works that I may enjoy, because this one was very successful for me. And then I gave 5 stars to Echo Mountain by Lauren Wolk. This was a recommendation from my friend Erin, and it is a middle grade, it is historical, and it's set in this like remote mountain community, and it features family dynamics. There is grief involved, there is stress from ill family members, there is a lot about herbal healing involved, and it really is just such a pull your heartstrings story. I absolutely loved it. I can't wait for my middle grade daughter to read it, because I think she's going to really enjoy it as well. And if you like middle grade, pick this one up, because it is one of the most phenomenally written middle grades that I have ever read. And then I gave 5 stars to Lost in the Moment and Found by Shannon McGuire. This is part of the Wayward Children series, and this is the only book so far in the Wayward Children series that I have given 5 stars. So it is officially my favorite in the series. This one's following Ancy, and her story was just really, really interesting, and there were different fantastical elements to it. Obviously, this is a portal fantasy novella series, but there were even more science elements to it than in other stories in this series. So yeah, it is officially my favorite of the Wayward Children series, and I gave it 5 stars. And then my last 5 star for first quarter was to Killers of a Certain Age by Deanna Rayburn. If you don't know, my besties definitely know, I love badass older character books, and that's exactly what this was. This was so good. It's following semi-retired assassins. They're like in their 60s, and they've got a hit out on them because of a sabotaging person in their organization. And it's just so cool, them using their resources and pulling on favors from over the decades, and the amount of backstabbing that happens, and just how they band together and make it through and clear their names. And it's so good. So good. And then my 2 lowest rated for March were both 3 stars and both graphic novels. The first one being Ever After by Olivia Buig. This was a graphic novel that's like YA with great art and great colorization. but it was zombies. And I don't do zombies. Not for any like triggering reason or anything. I don't like zombies in books. I don't really like zombies in movies. There are a couple of exceptions just for nostalgia factor, like Zombieland. But yeah, so the story was good, and the art was good, and the colorization was good. Just the fact that it was zombies knocked it down to a 3 for me. And then I picked up 1 Year at Ellesmere by Faith Erin Hicks. And I had higher hopes for this because I know that she illustrated Pumpkinheads alongside Rainbow Rowell's story. And I really, really, really had much higher expectations for 1 Year at Ellesmere. And it just fell flat. I think it could have been a lot better had the story been developed a little bit more. It almost felt like it was a draft instead of the final publication. All right, guys, that's it for my first quarter wrap up. I know I went a little bit quickly, but I have talked about the majority of these books in vlogs, which I will link for you in the description box. All of the vlogs where I talk about books that I read in first quarter. And yeah, I'm happy with how the first quarter went. It was a total of, let's see, 30 and 29 is 59, plus 10 is 69, plus 1 is 70, plus 5 is 75. 75 books that I read in first quarter, which is nuts. I know people that don't even read 75 books in a year, and I read 75 books in 3 months. I don't know how I did that. Wow. Okay then. Well, like I said, that's the end of my wrap up. I will be doing a quarterly wrap up from here on out, so you can expect a quarter 2 wrap up at the end of the summer. Or, I'm sorry, you can expect a quarter 2 wrap up at the beginning of the summer. And yeah, hopefully I have just as good things to talk about in quarter 2 as I did in quarter 1. So please let me know if you enjoyed the format of this quarterly wrap up, if there's anything you think I could change to make it flow a little bit better. I'm always open to suggestions. And if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I have seasonal recommendations coming up here very soon, plus more readathon vlogs and a super special project for May that I'm doing, and going to be using that for a video as well. So with that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!